Welcome to the Laurent Collective podcast, where we go deeper than just surface talk.
Each week, we'll explore everything from family, business, creativity, culture, and faith.
To make sure not to miss an episode, be sure to subscribe and hop on to Instagram at Laurent Collective to chat with us about this episode.
Hello.
Hello.
We are back. It's just us. No kids this time.
No kids. Sorry.
We'll have them back again. One of them, all of them, sometime. We'll have them all back again. But today, we have we've been in a bit of a reflection time. We've lived here in London, England for almost 6 years now.
Yeah, just a couple months away.
Yeah, and there are certain things, obviously for us to be here for 6 years, there are certain things that we obviously really, really love about the culture here. And we thought we'd share those with you of things we have learned from living in the UK and probably in general and like a European country in general.
Yeah.
Of things that we have really taken into our lives and have changed them in many ways.
I think in some ways probably some of it is probably unexpected. I think in some ways, especially when you think about moving to another country that speaks English as their main language, it's probably not going to be that much different in some ways.
It's not the same English. We have already talked about that before.
It's obviously not the same English, but yeah, for the most part, most things mean the same thing for the most part. But I think when you think about that, like culturally, it probably isn't going to be much different and all that kind of stuff.
You think that.
Yeah, you think that, right? Like you think that would be the case. But I would think probably certain things we probably would have thought that way, but others we were probably we knew things were going to be different. And so, I thought, like Maya said, we're just kind of in this unique, fun time of reflection. And just can't believe it's already been 6 years. It's just gone so fast.
It has.
But some of the stuff that we want to talk to you about, like we've really enjoyed kind of digging into and making kind of our own. And, it's been really cool.
Yeah, I would say before we get started too, we have done a couple podcasts that are like funny things that are about the cultural differences between the US and the UK. And so I wrote down that if you want to go back and listen to those, episode 3 and episode 22. And both of those, we talk about just like funny things that we have found very funny about again, it's not that we say like we do the UK and the US speak the same language, like kind of thing. And so those are like funny stuff, but this is a bit more of like parts that are like deep ingrained within the culture that like we have just really noticed and taken in. It's taken us time to adjust a couple of them. It's still adjusting. I should say we're not there yet. But that is kind of what we talk about now. So one of them that we thought we would chat about is just like time is different here. And I would say, I'll be on real, like we haven't traveled that much in other European countries since we've been here. Just all kinds of different reasons for that. Well, COVID, one thing, but but even before that, we've only traveled a little bit in the other countries. And
I think I would say too, when we first moved here, we really wanted to kind of get immersed into
culture in London,
culture of London and the area that we lived in and all that kind of stuff. That was like our main focus. We didn't feel like we should come to London, move here, and then travel everywhere else.
Yeah, and
that
just
wasn't
as we
really
were
kind
like,
of our thought.
Yeah, and just as we were like, we should start traveling, COVID happened.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
But the idea that time is different here, like meals are just longer. Like when you have a meal with somebody,
have them.
Yeah, when you have them yourselves, and in general, like when you have them with other people and stuff. It is, in the United States, and I should say, we're not saying this is a blanket statement for everyone in the United States and all of American culture. However, this is just our experience. And so I would say, because I know depending on what culture you're from and stuff in the U.S., like these can look different in your communities that you live within. But these are our personal experiences. So we'll say that as we're talking about all this.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
In general, meals are longer, meaning that like even whether you go to somebody's house, you host them here, or you go out to eat, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. You're committing yourself to like 4 hours, 3 hours,
probably
three.
4 hours.
4
is like
would be
half
pushing
a day.
Yeah,
that's
that's true.
Not that long.
3 hours feels like where I feel, what I remember from living in the States is we went out to dinner with somebody and it was like we were in and out in an hour.
Yeah.
Where here it's you linger at the table to the point where you have to like hunt down the person serving you to actually pay your bill, because they're not rushing you out. There's occasionally, if you were, I guess we don't necessarily eat at these places, if you were at a super high demand restaurant, maybe they would say like, we need you to leave by this time, but we've never had that experience. But yeah, and everyone eats slower, so it's
slower.
You just take
I think
your
the
time.
meals, yeah, I think the meals are broken up in a different way, a little bit, maybe in some ways. And again, I think what you said, Maya, like just like things have. When you're eating with somebody, when you're sharing a meal with somebody, there's no rush. If that makes any sense, there's no rush of like, we need, at least when you're going out. At least from what I've experienced and what we've experienced, the server's not trying to rush you out so that they can bring another person in to like sit at that table.
No, they'll keep coming back and saying like, do you want another drink and stuff like that. Yeah.
And so I think at least I've never noticed that. So that might be the case in some restaurants here, but the places that we've gone to, I have never really noticed that. It's more of like they're trying to engage you to stay longer, to continue to build community in that space. I think, again, thinking about when we first moved here and going to a pub or whatever, like just the idea that the pub was always an extension of your home, where that's the place that you would meet up with people and spend time with people. And a lot of times that is for hours, and again, it's not like going to a pub or a bar or whatever. And
bar is something different. Pub is like
a pub, going to a pub and feeling like you've got to like, drink a lot and like all this kind of stuff. Like it's more of like a, again, it feels like when you go out to eat, it feels like you're sitting at someone else's house and you're just sitting there having a meal. And it's like, it's very casual. It's very like intimate. It's very, it's just slower.
Yeah, and
I don't know how to. I think it's really hard to describe.
It's hard to describe. A great description I can think of, and this was before we moved here. So we had traveled here many years ago and traveled here, and then we also went to Paris. And I remember when we were in Paris, I don't know if you remember this, we were out to dinner one night, and like we had gotten our food, we had eaten, and we were ready and done, and like there was a couple that was next to us, and they had like, they were still on like their starters and their drinks, just chatting. And I think it was like, and we were realizing, whoa, we really kind of just rushed through this, and they were just slowly eating their food and enjoying it and stuff. And, often, whether we have people here or, we go to someone else's house and stuff like that, like the idea is generally like, enjoy this moment with people, really enjoy the food, but also enjoy the moment too.
Yeah.
So another thing with time, it's not always just with meals, but is also the idea of like long walks. So,
we've talked a little bit about.
We've talked a little about this before. I mean, obviously we live in London, so we're walking a lot more. But more of what we're talking about is like you just go on a walk to go on a walk, and it's called like the Great British Walk. Is often you'll hear that phrase and that kind of thing. And something we did talk about in one of the past episodes is like, first of all, there's infrastructure that is set up to make this something that is easier to do and possible. And so like you walk, there are paths that you walk through, like say there's a field with cows. Like there's a path through that field with a gate, and you're required to make sure you shut the gate so the cows don't get out, or the sheep or whatever. But you can walk through that path to get to the other side and go to that gate to get to the pathway that's going through the countryside there, and that kind of thing. That is not a thing in the United States. Maybe there is some place that it's like that, but I've never experienced that because it's like, this is my land, this is private property. You don't come near this kind of thing. But here it's like, in the properties, you have the right to walk through, and there's a path that you're supposed to be on. You're supposed to stay on the path and
there's
stuff.
There's normally that are paths that are like marked and all that kind of stuff, but yet you still can do that.
But the whole, it comes down even to like on Christmas Day, you eat a big meal and then you go on a long walk. Like that's like the Christmas Day walk. And you even experience it here in London, like, during COVID or pre-COVID and stuff like that. And even more this year as well. Like you go out on a walk on the river, and like everyone's out having a walk on Christmas Day and things like that. So it's just the idea of having a long, like, walk, not necessarily, I feel like when I think of going on a walk in the United States, it's like exercise driven. And maybe there's a little bit of that here, but it's more like you're just going on a walk to observe, to have a chat with somebody, to have a quiet moment with yourself,
Yeah,
to be
just
in
to
nature.
kinda, yeah.
Like it's just
Just to kind of
very
be.
different.
Yeah, just to
And
be.
it's not like like I feel like in the States, it'd be like, let's go on a hike. Like people do that here too,
Yeah,
but it's
there's
like
definitely hikes.
more of like just that like daily walk idea
Yeah.
of going on
I
a
mean,
walk.
to be so a great example, like since we've moved here, like now that it's again we've been here almost 6 years, like if there's a day that we haven't done some sort of walk or something that's
I mean, normally
felt
we're
like
walking
that,
2 to 3 miles a day.
yeah, I mean, I think we kind of feel off
And
because we
that's because
haven't
we
done
live in the
that.
city and stuff
Yeah.
too. But also, I feel like you're right. If we haven't for some reason, now that we've moved and we live a little bit closer to our kids' schools and stuff, there are sometimes days
Yeah.
that one of us will be like, I just need to go on a walk because I haven't walked that much today and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, it's again,
Well, I can even see that with our kids. So like Zane,
goes on walks.
he
Yeah.
goes on walks. Like he will just, not so much during the week, but mostly on the weekends. And he'll get to a point where he goes, I'm gonna go for a walk. I'll be back in like 20 or 30 minutes.
Yeah, and he just goes and he walks in the river,
Like-
or he goes, there's a cemetery nearby, and
Yeah.
that sounds weird to go walking in a cemetery, but they're really historic and like pretty and stuff. And so he'll go walk there.
Yeah.
And, whenever we talk to him, he's like, oh, I just needed to clear my mind and stuff like that. And like, I love that he's picked up on that part of culture of like, stop what you're doing, step away, like go do
Yeah.
this. And so yeah, that to me, that means time is viewed differently of that. Like that is an important thing. It's an
Right.
important thing to like walk away from it. And yes, we live in London, and yes, it's busy. Matt, I was in Soho last night and I was frustrated because there were so many people everywhere and people were rushing to get places and things like that. But like also people do this too. And I think another thing too is just your work hours are different as well. Now, again, I'm saying this for a certain category of people. So if you are somebody that works in like an office type of setting, where in the United States, I would often get to work at 7:30 in the morning. And when I tell people that here, they're like, what? Like, I don't even get up by that time because generally most work starts at 9 or 9:30 here. That is completely different, of course, if you're in like a restaurant, or something like that, where you've got to be there at 5:30 a.m. or you are a delivery driver. I mean, so I realize I'm kind of really speaking here to a very small
Certain type of
niche of
professional,
people,
yeah.
certain type of professional. But that is kind of like a little bit of a different thing of like you're not supposed to be there super early. Now you do work then. That means you work till like
You work
6
a
or
little bit
something,
later, yeah.
which means then meal times are all like pushed back as well. Lunch is more like 1 instead of noon. And then dinner, dinner's a whole nother thing because it gets confusing if a lot of people feed their kids and then eat separately later at like 8. I cannot hold out till 8. If we do that, I've got to have a significant snack in
But
between.
we have definitely gotten on the board where we don't eat until 1.
Yeah, we don't eat lunch
1:30
till 1
usually,
or 1.
so.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's just time is different when it comes to work and
Yeah.
stuff. And I think overall what we are saying in this like time is different is just like it feels, I know this is a really blanket statement to make, but it feels as if people just go at a slower pace. Again, I'm saying that, and I just gave the example of living in London, and you get caught up in the fast pace of things, but there's just a little bit more of like, whoa, we're going too fast here. Let's calm down. Like, let's have a moment. Let's go on a walk. Let's just have let's have a meal and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's just that feeling is in the culture.
I think the idea of time, at least from what we've experienced, again, this is what we've experienced coming from suburban America, that, coming here, we have learned how to take moments in better and to be present and to be able to slow down a little bit more than rush to this thing, to that thing, to this thing, to that thing. So.
And there's definitely, I think part of it comes down to that whole whatever the American dream is and stuff like that of like work hard, work. There are certainly people from different cultures and stuff like that that have that here, but there's a general like your life's not meant to be all about work all the time and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, there is that. And I think it's cool, especially living in London, because there's all these cultures meshing together, and a lot of cultures have a similar thing of that, like of just like coming together and showing up at your house and having long meals, and you're supposed to have lunch and dinner ready, like for people if they show up and stuff, like, so that we're also experiencing in London even more of a uniqueness of like all these cultures together and meshing together, or couples that are from two different cultures that then they've meshed their, cultures together and that kind of thing. I think related to time, but also separate in a way, is the idea of like taking holidays or vacations, and having time off from work. And like, even no matter where you are on the spectrum of like what kind of worker you are and stuff like that, like there's like law requirements and stuff for how much time you should get off. And I think it's like 22 days or something, or 23 days. It's somewhere around there. It's in the 20s of days that you're supposed to have off. And when I say that, I mean per year. Per year. And so this, and the idea is like, whether you're taking that time to go someplace, which most people take that very seriously. If we're say we're staying in London when there's like a kid's break from school, people are like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
You should at least go to the sea or something like that.
Our area really becomes kind of a ghost town.
It does. And that's just because of the area we live in, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But I think more of it is like, it's just the importance again of taking time off and stopping. And they take it seriously. So like, if you are on holiday, you're not supposed to be responding to emails and texts from work and stuff like that. Like it is. And if, I think they were trying to they haven't passed a law, but there's other places in Europe. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we eventually get into this as well, where they've literally passed laws that even on the weekends, like your work is not allowed to reach out to you. Again, that would depend if you're working on the weekend and
that
stuff.
That was even in just the show that you were watching.
What show?
Was that in Emily in Paris?
Oh, it might. Oh, yeah.
Where they talk about in France.
Horrible show. You should not watch it, but I got sucked into it.
That they talk about not checking emails on the weekends.
Yes, you shouldn't be working on the weekend and stuff. So that is just part of the culture and the idea of, of having the time off. This has been a huge adjustment for us because we're used to, the standard 10 days. And so for several years, we are now on that holiday schedule too. And for several years, it'd be like Pat would have like 15, if not more, days left, because 20 days at the end of the year, because he's not used to taking that many days off. And so sometimes it feels like, oh gosh, we need to take another time. We need to take more time off and stuff. And so it is, and it's very normal. Like we've shared with you guys recently, like we, for the first time in our lives, took off 2 weeks straight. That's totally normal. That's totally like, oh yeah, you would do that. You want a good chunk of time to take off straight and stuff. So again, I think it goes back to the time thing, but it also is that like, it's the slowness. Definitely.
Yeah. It's crazy to think that not too recently, at what age we're at, that was the first time we had taken 2 weeks off. I think people would think that's crazy.
I know. So. People here do think it's crazy.
Yeah.
And I think, again, all these things are kind of tying into each other. But another thing would be just we have a different appreciation for food here now. We were, we had definitely, I wouldn't call us foodies by any means, but
no,
we enjoy food and stuff like that and trying new things and new dishes and ethnic foods and stuff like that. But I think when you live in Europe, it's more about the idea of like, first, it's like the quality of the food. And I'm not saying like it's like upscale, that kind of thing, but like even stuff that you can get that is what some people, to go in and grab, I don't know, a sandwich at lunch or something like that, like a pre-made sandwich at lunch. Like all those have been made that morning and stuff. I was having this conversation with people the other night that they were talking about like, there's some great like petrol stations, like gas stations that you can get some really good sandwiches. And I was like, ew, like the ones in the United States have been sitting there for like 6 weeks or something. It feels like, and they're gross and stuff like that, but legit. You can go grab easy, healthy food here. I mean, like you go into any grocery store, most of them will have a section that is like all like pre-made sandwiches to pre-made salads to pre-made like poke bowls and like all these different things with rice and all this stuff. And like it's just easier to grab something.
I mean, they definitely
healthy.
have different food restrictions and things like that here as well. So that's, just different.
Some of that changes things, yeah.
Which changes, how they can serve food and what they do with it and stuff like that. So again, it's just, there's a lot of that difference that we've started to appreciate more. And again, I think when we, obviously living in London with all the different
We have
cultures
more
that,
access to
the
that for sure,
gateway
too.
city, this gateway city with so many different cultures here and so many different styles of food here, we have, again, like when I said, we have an access to such a wide range of what it, what food can be. And I mean, one of our favorite things to do during some of the kids' breaks is usually to find some new, restaurant or different thing that, we can try something new with them and see, if they like it or not. And I mean, yeah, we've waited in lines at little like
Korean street food
street
and
food
things
places
like that.
and things like that like, we hear a buzz about or whatever, just to see if we can give it a go. And so I think that's something that I think I'm really thankful for, that we're doing more as a family. And, our kids are, again, our kids have like curry at lunch. I mean, that's not something, I don't even think that word ever came to my school.
Probably not.
Growing up. So, but I just think,
they sadly do not have tacos at lunch though. So that's different.
So I think it's just funny to see kind of the staples and things that our kids are growing up with that are just normal.
Well, and not only the staples and stuff too, but the size, like the portion size,
sizes and stuff.
is just so different. And so if you've ever traveled to Europe, you'll experience that no matter what European country you're in. But like the plates are smaller, the portions are smaller. Like when we went, every time we've been back to the United States, like Pat and I often share a meal because the portions are so big, but we can't finish them and stuff. And so there's even just that too. And that's what's so interesting. Even though your plates and your portions are smaller, those meals go longer than they do in the United States. So there's even like, again, there's so much overlap with that, with it. So yeah, like it just, I mean, this is something we really appreciate about the culture here is the cheese.
Yes.
The cheese is so good here.
And it's accessible too.
It's pretty cheap. I mean,
not cheap.
Well, you can totally get expensive cheese.
Yeah.
We were someplace recently that it was going to be, I was like, oh, let's get some nice cheese at this place for like a night in and that kind of thing. And I'm not unwilling to spend 40 pounds on a block of cheese. That's ridiculous. But you can generally get good cheese at a good price.
Yeah. And I think with that, appreciating food, with that, and it kind of goes back to the time thing and meals and stuff, but just, relationships that are built over food. And it could be simple as just a cheese board with like some bread and things like that, but that can last like an afternoon in the park with somebody, and like
and like parks,
things like that. I think is just something that I honestly can't remember a time where we said, hey, let's meet at a park and have wine and cheese.
Well, in most American U.S. parks, you can't take
at a
wine
park
in anyways.
Now, again, that could be happening in like, the Chicagos and the New York cities and some of the bigger cities like in San Francisco and things like that. But where we live, again, our experience moving here and the things that we've learned is just, it's just fun. Like,
and I think that's when the weather gets nice. It's like you go out and you lay a blanket down in a park someplace and you meet people there. And I mean, that does turn into like a 5-hour affair often. It's like,
totally.
Let's do this. And then a bunch of people, let's go run and grab some tea. Or people bring thermoses and they have it.
Or I'm going to take
like
a nap when
or
you read
people,
a book.
People are like, I mean, and you're in that group setting and somebody like, and kids are running around because there's, more for them to do, and somebody might read a book or somebody might take a short nap, and you're just hanging out all day long with one another. And that's, again, I really like that too. I think the last thing we would say too, and this is just like an infrastructure thing that's different about the culture that we are thankful for, is just the accessibility to things. And so when we say that, we mean like basically like public transport, like trains and buses.
Just being able to get around.
And obviously we are living in London, and I know that's one thing, but even to get to other places, buses are not always coaches and stuff like that. Sometimes those are more difficult. Like when we were in Wales, they only come, every 40 minutes or something, but still they come every 40 minutes in a place that we were staying that was fairly remote.
Yeah, exactly.
And so even that, there was a bus stop right where we were staying. And so there's still a way for people to get around. And I think I appreciate it on so many levels of like, you don't have to have a car. I mean, yes, there are points, especially if you live outside of London, more in the suburbs and stuff like that would be very helpful. But like even where we were from, the suburbs, like they had a bus for a while that you could take, because we commuted to the downtown area, and they had a bus for a while that you could take from the suburbs to that. And then they just stopped it. And like, you loved it taking it because it meant you didn't have to drive and stuff like that. But it's things like that where it just feels like it makes it a bit easier for people to get to places. It's not always enjoyable. I hate being on the tube when it's rammed, but like we visited friends a couple weekends ago that live like 2 hours away, and like it was nice. We brought snacks. Everybody had books.
Well, I think again it
We
goes
went on the
back to
train,
that time is different thing where, we jumped on a train to go see some friends, and at the same time we were able to kind of like, for an hour and a half we sat on a train.
We played some
played card games, read books together, like had fun conversations. Obviously, it's not always going to be like perfect, and
well, we have kids, so
yeah, exactly. But I think again, it's you instead of being in the car and potentially, the kids are watching screens and reading books or whatever, and there's two separate locations if we were driving or whatever. There is some like, I wish we would be able to do that. That would be a little bit less expensive, but at the same time, like I really appreciate being able to just sit and spend time with my kids, even in that moment, even as we're traveling and doing something like that. There's just something fun about that. So,
and I mean, there's also just the idea too that because you're in Europe, it's super easy you can take a train to France. You can take a train. I mean, you can take a train all over Europe, but you can also then, if you wanted to, you can fly to places super cheap. I mean, like when I say this, like
cheap.
We went to Italy for £30, which is like $40 and stuff like
That's
that.
okay.
Like, yeah. And so that gives you can't get to California from Indiana for that price, or Florida even. And so it's just in general cheaper, and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, these are like everything from like looking at the time to holidays and food to, trains and all that. It's just stuff that we've really learned to love about the culture here, and really appreciate and are super thankful for too. And we're constantly learning, like we said, like we still are the Americans that eat too fast, I feel like.
Yeah, we still eat too
We're
fast.
still the Americans that are
Definitely.
like, oh my gosh, at the end of the year, like we have 10 days left we need to take and stuff like that. So we're still learning, but it's just stuff we appreciate. And we're just, I mean, a lot of the stuff is we've really taken into our lives, and it's made a huge difference. And it's making a huge difference for our kids too.
Yeah. And again, I think like we said from the very beginning, these are our experiences. These are the things that we're learning. It doesn't mean that some of this stuff doesn't happen in the States or in certain areas of the country. But it's just for us, these are the things that are really making an impact in our family and in us personally and things like that. And and we just, hopefully you can hear some of this and maybe
Come visit us.
Yeah, either come visit us. Yeah. Oh, yeah, we would love to have visitors again this time. So.
But we'd love to hear from you guys. Like if you've traveled, it doesn't even have to be to Europe, other places. We'd love to hear what you've learned from other cultures that you want to take into your life and that kind of thing. Because we love hearing about that too. So drop us a note and we will talk to you next time.
See ya.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode of the Laurent Collective podcast. If you enjoyed today's podcast, be sure to subscribe and leave a review, which helps others find our podcast. Continue the conversation with us over on Instagram at Laurent Collective.
We look forward to going deeper than just surface talk with you again next week.